In a world where movie licensed games almost always turn out shitty, Monolith Studios surprised everyone by releasing Shadow of Mordor. Despite being a Lord of the Rings licensed game, it actually ended up being surprisingly good, naturally prompting them to make this new sequel, Shadow of War, seeking to deliver more deep and expansive gameplay. So in spite of all the controversy surrounding the game's microtransactions, how well does it actually do in delivering on this? Let's dive right in and find out. Shadow of War follows closely with its predecessor Shadow of Mordor with fun gameplay mechanics. From its parkour system allowing you to traverse any surface with ease, to its Arkham Asylum or Assassin's Creed styled combat system. Taking out loads of orcs whether from stealth or in direct combat is always immensely satisfying in this game. And it's made even better by the host of new abilities to employ from stealth or in combat. And also expanded upon from the previous game is the Nemesis and Orc followers system. Not only are there more traits and personalities thrown into the randomizer, but they also made it easier to command your followers around to do your bidding from the menus instead of having to go up to them personally. And each orc is now associated with a certain faction, each granting them special skills and aesthetics. Like the sinister Dark Tribe devoted to Sauron, the Machine Tribe who build destructive weapons of war, or my personal favorite, the Marauder Tribe who employ liberal use of pilfered Gondorian artifacts. There's just so much variation and personality to this upgraded system that even as fun as the core gameplay is, I easily think this is the highlight of the game.
Your outlook here has grown quite grim, for soon I'll tear you limb from limb. A kettle! In the kettle!
Two mice! Squeaky, squeaky!
Worms are in my head and they wiggle!
Wiggle, 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 wiggle!
Both of these mechanics come together perfectly for the game's epic climactic sieges, where you gather up the captains you've converted, choose who you want to lead assaults, and who to infiltrate the fortress from within, all culminating in an epic battle with the fortress's overlord in the throne room, after which you get to choose from one of your own followers to replace as overlord, which will change the aesthetic of the fortress based on the faction they belong to, in addition to allowing you to pick war chiefs to head up certain aspects of the fort's defenses. Everything that makes this game fun really shines during these sieges. And the game's loot has been enhanced over the previous title, whereas before you would only get runes that would enhance the capabilities of your weapons. Now each weapon is actually a weapon in and of itself, with different appearances, stats, and upgrades you can unlock for them, making it much more exciting to get drops off of enemy orcs. And there's also a lot of variety in the environments here that keeps the game refreshing everywhere you go. Every new area you unlock is unique from the previous one, and if you don't care about a little bit of breaking lore, I personally thought it was really cool to see Minas Morgul from the movies before it became the City of the Dead. And apparently it's not 100% accurate to what's established in Lord of the Rings canon, which is apparently something this game does a lot, and I won't go into detail about that. I'll just leave a link to a Eurogamer video I saw that explains a lot of it. But if you're a casual Lord of the Rings fan like I am, and you might have only seen the movies or something, the kind of lore they expand upon in this game might be a little interesting to you, as it was for me. And the whole experience is accompanied by a fairly enjoyable soundtrack. It's nothing really too special, but definitely above average, something that definitely improves upon the experience. The game's open world sandbox is marred with this unshakable feeling that a lot of the content was cut for the sake of DLC. The world map is littered with these landmarks and other zones that aren't reachable in the game. And this certainly isn't helped by the fact that some of the portraits for these landmarks even show Talion in them, like they were designed for you to be able to go there but were cut in favor of DLC. And it also doesn't help that for a single player game, the playtime isn't really that amazing, not much better than the first one in fact. Thankfully this time there is an extensive post game to keep you busy once you do complete it, but even that's marred by the fact that the true ending is locked behind hours and hours of grinding in this post game. Oh, but don't worry, you can speed up this grind through, you guessed it, loot boxes. It's been no secret that this game contains loot boxes, the biggest plague on modern gaming. Now honestly, as far as loot box systems go, this isn't the worst I've seen. The premium currency used to obtain these high-end loot boxes is still obtainable in-game through daily challenges. The Orcs from the war chest can be traded for gear instead, and that gear can be broken down into Mirian as well, which is the game's standard non-premium currency, and that Mirian can then in turn be put into some of the lower-end loot boxes. The model for it is good in a game where it would fit, but the thing is, it doesn't fit in this game because they're already charging full price for the game and asking you to pay for the DLCs, which is evident from the blatant advertisement on the main menu. If you don't make one of those two things free, then it doesn't matter how good the microtransaction system is, it's still unforgivable to include it in the first place. And the story that all this grinding is for isn't even that interesting in the first place. For anyone who's at the very least just seen the movies, the plot is entirely predictable down to every detail. You'll know what's gonna happen several missions before it actually happens. And it doesn't even accompany this shitty plot with interesting characters. You'll really end up not giving a shit about any of the main characters, even Talion and Celebrimbor, both of whom actually had some likable character in the previous game. But worst of all of these is the stupid humanized Shelob they decided to go with. Every scene she's in could have been done with her as a talking spider instead, and it would have made it 1,000 times better. Thankfully though, the Orc characters hold up the show, with most of the game's most entertaining performances.
Deep, there's a fortress nearby. They say it's ruled by a two-headed troll big as a mountain. Deadly smart, which, well, I guess he'd have to be given the two heads. You take him down, you'll send a message to Sauron, and get yourself some nice new digs as part of the bargain.
I'm not going to do this alone.
Gather your troops. Will do. Oh, just make sure you let me pop his heads off, won't ya?
Even the randomized Orc personalities are more interesting, and they're really what hold up a lot of the side content, which in and of itself can get pretty grindy with a lot of the same missions repeating over and over again, just in a different zone with different Orcs, which is especially bad when you get fight pit missions, which are required for you to play spies in enemy fortresses, and take all the control away from the player. Having a gameplay mechanic where the mechanic is to not play the game feels kinda like a mobile game, except here you can't even bypass these segments with microtransactions. I'll admit it does a good job of making sure you don't overthink a siege, but it doesn't do so in a compelling way. Instead, you end up preparing less for a siege because you just want to avoid the boredom it takes. And next, while I do like the new weapon and armor system, it's unfortunate how many of these items are just recolors of the same model and how there's no way to customize the appearance. Fortunately for me personally, I did manage to find combinations of items that I actually really enjoyed the look of. But if I found an item that was an upgrade in stats, I'd have to get rid of the previous better looking item to use it, which kinda got on my nerves. And plus, if you're not fortunate like I was, you might have a bit of an issue with the lack of variety for armor and weapon appearances. The controls are also pretty janky and poorly laid out on the PC, which takes a lot of getting used to, or a lot of key remapping in the main menu. And the in-game camera is also really wonky and jittery when you're in control of it, which could also very well be an issue with the PC port with the mouse and keyboard controls, where you have a lot more small precise inputs compared to the thumbstick. And lastly, this isn't necessarily a problem I've been having personally, but I've heard a lot of people complaining about some really poor graphics on the game. Now don't get me wrong, the game's graphics aren't really that spectacular at all, except for one thing, and that is the water. I think the water in this game looks absolutely hideous. Everything else though, I'd say it's serviceable. Not great, but it works. Whenever I encountered a new area in this game, the excitement was always drained when I realized I'd have to start grinding all the intel all over again to find all the information on all the war chiefs. While the intel system works fine when you're already acquainted with a zone and have a lot of intel already, and you just need to get little bits of new intel on newly introduced captains, but starting from scratch where you have no intel and all the captains are still alive can be a real grind. So I would have made it so any captain you reveal through intel will also reveal the information on connected captains such as bodyguards or blood brothers. A small change that wouldn't really affect you too much once you already have a lot of intel in the zone, but would give you a big head start in a new zone where the enemy still holds their fortress, since a lot of the war chiefs usually have 2 or 3 bodyguards tied to them. And next is in regards to the post-game content. As much as I despise how the ending is locked behind hours and hours of play in this post-game, I wouldn't actually do away with it since it does actually provide a lot of incentive to keep playing after you finish the game. And it plays towards the game's strength, which is the sieges and collecting new Orc captains like little Pokemon. So instead I would just put the ending cutscene before the post-game, with sort of a fade to black many years later kind of transition, where after you see the ending, then you get the tutorial introducing you to the Shadow Wars, and explaining that you'll be playing the events that led up to the ending. And for all this effort, instead of rewarding you with the ending to the game you should have gotten in the first place, reward us with special unique armors and weapons, and /or new gameplay modes like New Game Plus, or maybe even something even more unique where you can, like, I don't know, play as an orc for the campaign. Or replace all the orcs in the campaigns with the screaming ones that don't say any words except just screaming. Or special difficulty modifiers where every captain is an O-log. There's lots of different ways they could have rewarded us for all the effort in the post-game that wouldn't have required them to create new assets, and wouldn't have made players feel like they were being pushed towards the invasive microtransactions in order to beat the game. And so with all that, I'm ready to come to my final verdict for Middle-earth Shadow of War, which I'm gonna give an 8 out of 10. The gameplay is absolutely phenomenal, 10 out of 10 material in fact. With the combat, the stealth, the parkour, the nemesis system. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you cheer, it'll make you rage. But only if you can push the microtransactions and the shitty grindy story at the back of your mind. And even if you can, it's still there and it's weighing down the game a lot. I want to recommend it because it's so much fun and the nemesis system is fantastic. But at the same time, I want to warn people away because of the microtransactions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and give it my recommendation. Go out and get this game and you'll have a lot of fun with it. But don't buy any of the microtransactions, boycott them, pretend they don't exist. And when you get to the post-game in Act 4, just go look up the ending on YouTube instead like I did. It'll free up your post-game experience to enjoy the game instead of worrying about what's gonna happen in the end. Anyways, that's all for this video. Remember to go down below the video and press random buttons. I personally find the subscribe and like buttons the most attractive, but hell, even the dislike button helps. Also, if you want to support my channel on Patreon, click a little thing that should be appearing in the top right corner right about now, and that will take you to my Patreon page where you can become a patron today. But anyways, until next time, I will see you guys later. Nazu! Oh, Nazu, you're the greatest.